In the great expanse of the Pacific Ocean, there is a place like no other, Pitcairn Island, home to the descendants of the mutineers of His Majesty's armed vessel, the Bounty. During this first Round the Island documentary by drone, we will visit remote locations rarely seen even by the Pitcairn Islanders. We will visit historic places such as the petroglyphs at Down Rope and the Gods, the majesty of St. Paul's Pool and its spires, and enter the cave at Gudgeon through its submerged entrance. The cave boasts a magnificent white sand beach deep inside the island. Ahead is Bounty Bay. Later we will go underwater and visit the wreck of the Bounty. There is excitement in the air as the cargo ship Claymore 2 has just arrived, bringing long-awaited mail and supplies. She visits 4 times a year, carrying up to 12 passengers, so that a maximum of 48 people can visit in 1 year. This is the earliest known photograph taken at the landing in 1890. And in 1928. Today is a very calm day. Some days it is so rough the waves break over the jetty, making leaving or landing impossible. Ships have left disappointed because the passengers could not get ashore. In the days before motors, the islanders struggled rowing out through the surf to fish and to visit passing ships. I have a vivid memory of a past trip. We arrived late at night. I was picked up by the longboat, and we powered through the breaking waves into the landing through a thunderous surf in total darkness. It was an experience I will never forget. The Pitcairn Islanders look forward to visitors. They will get to catch up with current events from the outside world and to make new friends.
We shall meet on that beautiful shore in the sweet by and by. We shall meet on that beautiful shore.
For well over 100 years, the only way to get the longboats up and down the ramp was by human power. Our first stop on this trip around the island is the iconic pointed rock known as Old Man. We are over the spot where the Bounty rests after being burned by the mutineers on the 23rd of January, 1790. No one knows how Old Man got its name. The name Old Man has been used as far back as anyone can remember. The red soil and rock on Pitcairn is due to the high iron content, so you can say the island is rusting away. The two rocks just offshore are known as the Stones. Next, we move on to Adams Rock with its lone coconut tree. How it took root and grew on this spot is truly amazing. The white substance on top of the rock is guano, or otherwise known as bird poop. Next stop is the Gods, the area of hardened gray volcanic ash that stands out from the red soil and rocks of Pitcairn Island. Here is another example of the many different layers of Pitcairn. We see the gray volcanic ash in the middle, surrounded by lava, with traces of yellow sulfur and red iron on the right. The climb down the sheer cliff to the Gods is definitely not for the faint-hearted. Even a few Pitcairners have dared not venture here. This area is named after these two ancient petroglyphs, which are believed to be of early Polynesian gods. The lines and dots are thought to be a form of a calendar. You can see from the ominous climb back up why few visit this site. Yes, that's me on top of the rock. To get here, you must hike down the far valley through the bush, then travel along the shore of sharp lava to get to this secluded spot. Ahead is St. Paul's Pool with its majestic spires. St. Paul's Pool is a place you will never forget. It is nestled on the eastern side of the island and is a must-see place filled with crystal clear water, lobster and fish. This is where many learned to swim going back to the days of the Bounty. In the 1950s and 60s, the Pitcairn Islanders on Saturday afternoons after church would come here to have a picnic and swim in the pool. Even on a calm day, you can see the waves pile up and come crashing through the spires. St. Paul's Pool is the most photographed place on Pitcairn. It is easy to see why. The big scoop out of the side of the island ahead is known as Down Rope. It is home to Pitcairn Island's only beach. The only way down to the beach is to climb down a treacherous cliff. You start at the far right, and make your way down to the bay on the left. We are now about halfway down. The last half is the easiest, or is it? The numerous plastic fishing floats that have washed up here over the years litter the beach. Some are hanging like ornaments on the trees. The black spot ahead contained the famous petroglyphs of Downrope. They are believed to be about 1,500 years old and have not yet been deciphered. This cliff on the west side of Downrope is a very colorful place with its strong yellows and reds and countless small caves that are a wonderful haven for nesting birds. As we head out to sea, I cannot help but to think that this was the very first sight the early Polynesians saw of Pitcairn Island. The area of green on the sloping hill ahead of us I jokingly refer to as the golf course because there is so little flat land on the island. The heavily wooded area by the coast is known as Tautama. This is one of the largest known Polynesian factories of stone tools in the South Pacific that was used until the 17th century. Like most places on Pitcairn, Tautama is very difficult to get to. Brenda is my guide with Isabel on her back. Once you arrive, you will find fragments of worked stone that litter the area. These are a few examples of primitive stone tools found around Tautama. Highest Point is our next stop. Yes, that's me again. You can see how isolated Pitcairn Island really is. We are in between Easter Island and Tahiti, and they are both over 2,000 kilometers away. March 2015, the Pitcairn Island Marine Reserve was formed. It is now the largest marine reserve in the world, consisting of 322,000 square miles of pristine waters, largely unaffected by human activity. A mother and 1-week-old humpback whale wintering in the safety of Pitcairn Island. They can be found here in July, August, and September. We are now going to enter the least visited place on Pitcairn Island, Gudgeon Cave. The only way in is through this tiny opening. Inside, there is a beautiful wall-to-wall white sand beach. The cave is quite high, about 70 feet to the ceiling. The trip out has to be timed perfectly within the troughs of the waves so the boat does not get crushed on the jagged ceiling of the cave. Randy Christian was our hero today. This is a good example of Pitcairn's shoreline with its lava rock and tide pools filled with octopus, crabs, and fish. Here is the new harbor that has just been constructed on the south side of the island. Now people can get ashore when it is too rough to land in Bounty Bay on the north side. You can see the natural deepwater channel that leads to the new dock. Meet Mrs. T, the last surviving Galapagos tortoise of the 5 that were brought to Pitcairn Island between 1937 and 1951 on the Brigantine Yankee. Mrs. T spends most of her days at Ted's side on the south side of the island foraging for fruit. We are now on the northwest side of the island, and the rock closest to Pitcairn is known as Matt's Rock, named by or for Matthew Quintal. The other is known as Young's Rock, named after Edward Young. Both were seamen and mutineers on the Bounty. With no radio interference, the drone was able to go almost 5 miles offshore and 3/4 of a mile high to get these shots. Notice the whale spouting near the bottom right. It is the same mother and calf we saw earlier. We are back on the north shore heading for Gudgeon Cave, the most recognizable landmark on Pitcairn Island. In front of us is a rock known as Banging Iron, where the forge from the Bounty was set up, protected by this massive rock. Banging Iron got its name because the folks in town could hear the men forging steel or banging iron to make nails and tools. The hot fire from the forge produced these vivid colors that are still visible almost 230 years later. Could it be that this rock was once the plug for Gudgeon Cave? The shape is very similar and it is directly below the cave. Fletcher Christian was said to have taken refuge in this cave during the conflict on the island that took the lives of all the mutineers and Tahitian men with the exception of John Adams. When the ship Topaz arrived on Pitcairn Island in 1808, John Adams was the only adult male left alive on the island, along with all the Tahitian women and children. This was 18 years after the Bounty landed on the island. The Norfolk pine that sits on top of Gannett's Ridge was recently hit by lightning. What it looked like before the lightning strike. Below us is the school and teachers' residence that were built in 1951. We are approaching Jackie Christian's house, where I will be joining Leslie, Paul, and Sue for dinner. Fun and games with Paul and Sue. The smart drone would not let them catch it. Now for a tasty New Zealand lamb dinner. Tom and Betty Christian's home is on the right and Jackie's is on the left. In the center of the three buildings is a group of rocks. This was the foundation of Thursday October Christian's house, who was the grandson of Fletcher Christian. The earliest known photograph of Thursday October Christian was taken in 1898. Notice his large hands and his feet that probably never wore shoes. This is his home in 1899, 1938, and 1962. Now let's visit the historic island cemetery where generations of Bounty descendants rest. I will never forget my good friends. Meet Nola Warren standing beside the grave of her husband Reynold, who recently passed away. Tom Christian, to whom I had the privilege of staying with on my first trip to Pitcairn. Irma Christian, who had a delightful sense of humor. This is the oldest home on the island, belonging to Reynold and Nola. It is currently uninhabited and will soon be reclaimed by nature. A bird's eye view of Adamstown. The cemetery is at the top left. The town square is the large building in the center with the green roof of the church on its right. The red roof of the museum is right below the square. We are now going to visit the home of Paul and Sue. Meet Pirate Paul and Buccaneer Sue. Andrew Christian, myself, and Paul Warren. Their home is quite large and comfortable. If you can't find Paul, just look in his workshop where he spends most of the day. Paul and I on the Bounty's anchor, which was recovered by the Yankee in 1957. These artifacts were recovered from the Bounty. The rarest material is, of course, wood. And this is the Bounty's Bible. They say I look like John Adams. These are recovered ballast bars from the Bounty. Ballast bars are the only visible remnants of the ship on the ocean floor today. The home of Randy and Nadine Christian. Meet Emily, Nadine, Bradley, and Adriana Christian. Bradley, Emily, and Ryan posing for a picture. There is no surf break on Pitcairn, so the alternative is barefoot surfing on lava. Andrew Christian's home is the highest home on the island. It is never dull at Andrew's place. He makes mouth-watering pizza. It is a wonderful place for song and dance, and a great time. The Island Store. You can see the foundation of the new store starting to take shape around it. Venture past this point at your own risk. I think this is an invitation for a challenge. This is the top of the rock known as Ship Landing Point. The Bounty lies just offshore below us. The rock at the end is known as the Nose. As you can see, its days are numbered as it is separating from the hill. The climb to the top is harrowing, knowing it could break off at any time. Looking back from the nose. After tiptoeing out to the edge, I captured this incredible image, and this one a couple of days later after a heavy rain. One happy guy.
There's a land that is fairer than day, and by faith we can see